My phone has rung 11 times since I sat down in this chair, all from my daughter. I have not answered a single one, and I do not plan to. The notary's office is on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Kingston, and through the tall windows I can see Lake Ontario stretched gray and heavy under a February sky. Snow started again this morning, fine and persistent, the kind that falls sideways in the wind and catches in your collar before you reach the door. I am still cold from the walk across the parking lot, even now, even sitting here under the warm hum of ceiling lights, with a paper cup of tea going cold between my palms. The notary slides a folder across the desk toward me with both hands, as though she understands that what is inside deserves that kind of care. "Take all the time you need," she says. I do not need time. I have had 4 to sit with this decision, and the longer I sit with it, the more certain I become. I open the folder and pick up the pen. My hand is steady, I notice that, and I am almost surprised by it. My phone buzzes again on the arm of the chair. My daughter's name glows across the screen, the 12th call. I turn it face down. There are 3 pages to sign. I sign the first without hesitation. 2 days ago, I said 3 words to my daughter on the phone, and those 3 words were the reason she has been calling ever since. 3 words that closed something between us and opened something else, something I could not have imagined needing until the moment I needed it most. The notary watches quietly as I sign the 2nd page, then the 3rd. When I finish, she gathers the documents into a neat, final stack. "That's everything," she says. "It's done." I exhale slowly. Through the window, a curtain of snow blurs the lake into a pale suggestion of itself. It feels right, somehow, that the world outside looks soft and changed. Because everything has changed. My phone begins to ring again. I look at it. Then I pick it up. The invitation to the christening arrived by text message. Not a card, not a phone call. A text forwarded to me 5 days before the event from my son-in-law. "Thought you should know. Sunday the 18th, 2 p.m., St. Andrews. Small family gathering, keeping it intimate." That was it. "No, we'd love to see you." "No, can you make it?" Just a notification, the kind you send to someone you are not certain you want there, but cannot entirely leave out. I told myself not to read too much into it. My daughter and I had been walking carefully around each other since the summer, when a disagreement about my visits had turned sharp in a way that left marks on both of us. She had said things that were hard to unhear. I had responded with silence, which was probably not better. We found our way back to something that resembled normal, but it was a careful kind of normal, the sort where you both know where the edges are and try not to step too close. I bought a gift for my granddaughter, a hand-stitched quilt in pale yellow and cream that I had been finishing for months. I drove an hour and 20 minutes from my house in Westport to Kingston, in the early February cold, the heater running full, the roads clear and glassy in that particular morning stillness that follows an overnight frost. The church was small and lovely. Candles, a baptismal font draped in white linen, the sound of an organ, playing something I did not recognize, but which felt like it belonged to the cold and the stone, and the light coming through old windows. I sat in the 3rd pew, a little to the left. I could see my daughter's profile from where I sat. She was radiant in the way that only new mothers are, exhausted and transcendent at once. When she held my granddaughter, she looked like she was holding the entire world in her arms. She did not look at me once during the service. I told myself she was focused on the baby, on the ceremony, on staying composed. After, in the parish hall, there was a small reception. My son-in-law's family had arranged everything, and it showed. Trays of sandwiches, little cakes, a clipboard for signing a memory book. A photographer moving between clusters of people with practiced ease. His mother orchestrated the room with the quiet authority of someone who had planned it in her head long before today. She greeted me with a smile that reached only as far as it needed to. I looked for a moment with my daughter. I waited near the doorway where she would pass. I waited near the table where my granddaughter was being held and admired and passed between relatives I barely knew. Every time I stepped closer, someone was already there. Every time I paused, her eyes landed somewhere just past me. I had the quilt over my arm in a gift bag. I kept thinking there would be a minute, just one quiet minute, when I could slip it to her and say all the things I had been holding since the baby was born. Then my son-in-law appeared at my elbow. He was wearing a dark suit and a pleasant expression, the kind that can mean anything. "Hey," he said, "I actually need to tell you something." He tilted his head slightly, a small, practiced gesture. "The dinner tonight, after the christening, we're keeping it to immediate family, just the four of us and my parents, who drove in from Brockville. The table is just too small, I'm sure you understand." Immediate family, his parents, not me. "Of course," I said. "Because what else do you say when you are standing in a parish hall with a gift bag over your arm and your granddaughter's face turned away from you?" "I understand completely." I set the gift bag near the memory book table. I did not sign the book. I walked out through the door into the cold, stood on the stone steps for a long moment, breathing air that tasted like winter, then drove home in a silence that was not peaceful. The call came the following morning, before 9. I had been up since 6, old habit from 30 years of nursing shifts, the kind of schedule that rewires your body so thoroughly that sleeping past dawn begins to feel like a mistake. I was at the kitchen window with my second cup of coffee, watching the birds at the feeder when my phone rang. It was not my daughter, it was my son-in-law. "Morning," he said, cheerful in the way of someone who wants something. "She looked perfect yesterday, didn't she? Listen, I wanted to catch you before the week gets away from us. Something came up and I thought I should talk to you first." A pause, exactly long enough to feel intentional. "It's about the cottage." I set my cup down. The cottage has been in my husband's family for 43 years. A 4-season property on a small lake north of Westport, built by my husband's father in the late 70s and passed down to us when his parents could no longer manage it. My husband and I spent every summer there for 22 years. Our daughter learned to swim in that lake. She caught her first fish from that dock. She spent 3 weeks there every August, from the time she was 2 years old until she left for university. When my husband died 4 years ago, the cottage came to me, and I had not once thought of it as anything other than a place that held everything I loved. "What about the cottage?" I said. "Well," he exhaled, the way people do when they have rehearsed what comes next. "A contact of mine works with a development group. They've been looking at properties along that corridor, remote lakefront, 4-season road access. The numbers are actually quite strong right now. He thinks we could be looking at 400,000, maybe 450 if we go to tender. $450,000. The number dropped into the kitchen like a stone into still water. "And you're telling me this because we'd love to be part of it." Your daughter and I. His voice warmed up, as if we were already agreeing. The cottage will come to her eventually anyway, right? If we could move on this now, we could use our share to get out from under our mortgage. We're stretched pretty thin with the new baby and the rates being what they are. And you'd walk away with significant funds. You could look at a condo somewhere closer to the city. Be near your granddaughter. Be near your granddaughter, gentle. I knew exactly what it was. I have a home, I said. Of course, this would just be an option. Has my daughter asked you to call me? A pause, shorter this time. We talked about it together. We both think. I'll think about it, I said, which was not yes. He heard it as yes or chose to. The texts started that afternoon. From my daughter this time. Have you had a chance to think about what my husband mentioned? He says the window on this could close quickly. I know it's a big decision, but it would mean so much to us. Then, his contact needs something in writing by end of the week. Even just a letter of intent, nothing binding. Then, the following morning, Mom, we really need this. Please don't make us chase you on it. Please don't make us chase you, as though I were the one who had started running. On Thursday, a man came to the cottage. I had not planned to drive out until the weekend, but something told me to go that morning. The roads were bare and dry, and I wanted to sit in the quiet of a place that still smelled like my husband. I was on the county road, 3 minutes from the turnoff, when I passed a gray pickup going the other direction. Slow, nearly stopping. The driver was looking at the laneway at the property line. He had a clipboard. When I turned in and parked, I could see that someone had already walked down to the dock. Boot prints in the crusted snow, fresh, leading from the road. I stood at the end of the lane and watched him walk back up. He was in his 30s, wearing a jacket with a company logo on the breast pocket. I could not quite read from where I stood. When he saw me, he stopped. Then he kept walking, straight to the truck, got in, and drove away without a word. I stood there in the cold for a long time. That evening, a voicemail from a number I did not recognize. Hi, this message is for the property owner at. And then my address. I'm reaching out on behalf of Northern Shore Properties. We've had some preliminary discussions regarding this lot and would love to schedule a formal walkthrough at your convenience. Preliminary discussions. I had agreed to no discussions. I had agreed to nothing. I called my daughter. She answered on the second ring. Were you aware that someone has been walking my property? I asked. A silence. Then, Mom, they just want to get a sense of the site. It's not a big deal. It's trespassing. It was just a preliminary look. Nobody signed anything. Someone came onto my land without my permission, and you knew. We didn't think you'd mind if it was just. I mind, I said. I want you to understand that I mind. She was quiet. When she spoke again, her voice had gone thin at the edges, the way it does when she is trying not to say something she knows she will not be able to take back. Mom, we are underwater on our mortgage. We have a baby. My husband's business lost 2 contracts this year. If we don't do something, we are going to lose the house. A breath. The cottage is just sitting there. Dad would have wanted us to be okay. Don't use your father on me, I did not say it. But something sealed shut inside me in that moment. Your father loved that cottage, I said quietly. He asked me to keep it. She hung up. The envelope arrived the next morning. Return address, Northern Shore Properties. Inside was a 2-page letter, formal and polished, referencing a signed letter of intent to sell, Signed, apparently, by me, dated the previous October. I read it 3 times. I have never signed any such document. I was not in contact with any development company in October. I had never heard of Northern Shore Properties until 4 days ago. My handwriting is distinctive. My grade 4 teacher called it expressive, thick cursive loops that have not changed in 60 years. The signature on the letter of intent was a passable imitation, not perfect, but passable. Passable enough, perhaps, for paperwork moving quickly through busy hands. I drove into Kingston that afternoon, not to my daughter's house. I spread the letter across my lawyer's desk and watched her read it. She asked me several calm, precise questions. When I finished explaining, she removed her glasses. "Someone submitted this on your behalf without your knowledge or consent," she said. "That's fraud. We can report it. But more importantly, we can act now to make the property untouchable." She paused on that word. "If you place the cottage in an irrevocable trust with specific conservation conditions, it is removed from your estate entirely. No one can petition for it through your heirs. Any pending letter of intent becomes void because the property no longer belongs to you in any transferable sense." What happens to the cottage? It continues to exist and can be maintained and used, but it cannot be sold, subdivided, or commercially developed. You'd name a steward, a conservation body, a land trust organization. Whatever you specify. She looked at me steadily. Once it's signed, it cannot be undone. By anyone. I looked at the fraudulent signature on her desk. I thought about the summer my granddaughter will be old enough to wade in that lake. About the August light on the water in the early morning. About my husband running his hand along the dock railing. The last summer, he was well enough to be there. "Let's do it," I said. The papers were ready within 48 hours. I sat in the notary's office on a Friday morning in February. Lake Ontario gray and wide through the window, my daughter's name flickering across my phone for the 12th time, then the 13th. I signed each page without hurrying. When I finished, the notary thanked me and said she would file by end of day. Then I picked up my phone. She answered before the first ring finished. Her voice was thin and frantic. The voice she had used as a teenager when she knew she had gone too far and could not find her way back. Mom, please, I've been calling since Tuesday. You need to talk to us. My husband says the development company is getting impatient and there's some legal issue with the letter and he's been going back and forth with their lawyer and everything is." "Stop," I said. She stopped. "There's something you need to hear." A silence, careful and held. I could hear her breathing. "The cottage has been placed in an irrevocable conservation trust. As of this morning, it is no longer my property and no longer part of my estate. It cannot be sold, it cannot be developed, it cannot be transferred to you, to your husband, or to anyone else." A longer silence then. "What?" "It's done." Those were the 3 words. Quiet and certain, like something finally closed after being left open too long. "It's done." "Mom, you can't. That was always supposed to come to me." "Nothing was supposed to come to you," I said. "You grew up there. That is not the same as ownership. The company has that letter. They think it's real. If we can't produce the property." "That letter is fraudulent," I said. "My signature was forged. I've already reported it." A silence unlike the others. Longer, different in quality. "I didn't know about that," she said. "I know. My husband told me it was just a formality. He said you had agreed informally and the letter was just to get things in motion. Her breath caught. He told me you said yes. I did not respond to that. Mom, quieter now. He told me you said yes. I never said yes, I said. Not once in any form to anyone. I could hear the sound of something shifting in her. The particular quality of silence that belongs to a person realizing they have been standing on ground that was never solid. He's been under so much pressure, she said finally. Her voice had gone flat. The business, the mortgage. He kept saying if we could just get this sorted, everything would be okay, that we'd finally be able to breathe. She paused. He never actually mentioned you when he talked about it. Not you. Just the property, the asset, the land. Another pause. I didn't notice that until right now. I closed my eyes. There's something else, she said. Her voice had dropped further. Last week, when he thought the deal was going through, he started talking about us moving. A fresh start somewhere. New city, new house. He said we'd finally have the capital to do whatever we wanted. A long exhale. He never once mentioned that you would have nowhere to go for summers. He never mentioned you at all. I held the phone and said nothing. Mom, she whispered, what has he been doing? I don't know the full picture, I said carefully, but whatever he owes, it is not the cottage. It was never the cottage. She began to cry. Not the sharp, pressured tears of someone who wants something. These were the other kind, the kind that come when the image you held of your life turns out to be different from the life itself. I told people at the christening dinner that we were going to renovate it together, she said. His parents, my friends. I talked about it like it was already decided. Her voice broke on the word. I was so proud. I thought it was going to be a real family thing. A project, something we built. I know, I said. I'm so sorry, Mom. The words came out rough and unsteady. For the christening, for the texts, for all of it, I am so sorry. I sat with that for a moment. She had not apologized to me in a very long time. I had almost forgotten what it sounded like. I know, I said again. 5 months passed before the first real thaw. Not the weather, though that came too. Ontario springs arrive all at once when they finally decide to, sudden and generous after a long gray winter. The ice went out on the lake in early April, and by May the dock was clear and the birches along the shore had come back pale green and tentative. The trust partnered with a local land stewardship organization, which began a quiet habitat restoration program along the shoreline. They brought in a group of students from a school in Westport in June to learn about freshwater ecosystems, and I watched them from the porch with their boots in the mud and their notebooks open, pointing at things in the water and arguing cheerfully about what they were. I thought about my daughter at that age, standing on the same dock with her father's hand on her shoulder, asking questions he could never answer fast enough. My son-in-law's development deal collapsed in March. Northern Shore Properties had been operating with inflated appraisals across several properties in eastern Ontario, and the investigation that followed was not small. I do not know the full extent of what he had signed or what he had promised in other people's names. That is not my story to carry. My daughter called me in April. Her voice was tired and careful, the way it sounds when she is being honest rather than strategic. I owe you an apology, she said. More than one, probably. Probably, I agreed. She came to see me on a Saturday in May. We sat at my kitchen table with tea, and I let her talk for a long time without interrupting. She talked about feeling pulled in two directions at once, about not knowing who to believe, about the shame of having stood in a church hall watching her mother leave without saying a word. "I think I stopped seeing you as a person somewhere along the way," she said, looking at her cup. "I saw you as reliable, endless, like there was no cost to anything I did because you would always be there anyway." She looked up. "That's not a compliment. I know that." "No," I said, "it isn't. I think I grew up watching you give and never say no, and I stopped seeing it as a choice. I just assumed it was what you did." I held that for a moment. It was one of the most honest things she had ever said to me. "I said no," I told her quietly, "and the world didn't end." She almost smiled. "No," she said, "it didn't. We are not where we were before all of this. I am not certain we should be. Some distances, once measured, cannot simply be unmeasured." But she brought my granddaughter over last Sunday, and I sat on the back step with that baby settled against my chest while the garden came back around us, and something in me that had been braced for a very long time softened a little. Not all the way, but enough. The cottage stands where it always has. The dock is solid, the water is cold and clean and deeply familiar, and the land at last is safe. Not because I held it tightly, but because I let it belong to something larger than any one person's claim on it. I spent 40 years believing that love meant making yourself easy to take from, that a good mother opens every door and keeps opening them, regardless of what walks through. I know differently now. The hardest thing I ever did was decide that what I had built was worth protecting, and then actually protect it. Not everything that belongs to you is for others to decide the value of, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let someone else set the price. What did this story make you think of? And where in Canada are you listening from tonight?